Is as talented as he is controversial, and after nearly 50 years in show business, he remains one of the most enduring entertainers ever. His first appearances in 1940 created the Bobby Sox craze, and the kind of frenzy he created amongst fans was very much like Beatlemania in the 60s. But Old Blue Eyes could do more than just sing. His charisma and style carried over to films. He made over 40 of them. One of his most memorable was his Majo in From Here to Eternity.
Watch out for Fatso. He'll try to crack you. He'll say, put you in a hole. Don't yell. Don't make a sound.
That role won him an Oscar in 1953, but it's his stormy private life that continues to intrigue the press and his public. He's been married 4 times, once to Ava Gardner, and later to a much younger Mia Farrow. And along the way, there were celebrated affairs with some of Hollywood's most glamorous women. Throughout his career, there have been allegations that he's been a bit too chummy with organized crime figures, although there has never been any proof. But those connections, along with his many friendships with American presidents, have raised many troublesome questions about cover-ups and influence peddling. Now at the age of 70, Sinatra is still crooning. He has endured. And as Paul Anka's famous song says, Frank Sinatra has endured his way.
I did it my way.
With me now, Kelley, who has researched the life of Frank Sinatra and written his unauthorized biography called His Way. Hello.
Hi, Valerie.
Now, first, we talk about the women. What is it that so many women found so unbelievably attractive about Frank Sinatra?
Oh, very sexy man. He was the first American superstar singer. He has a voice that is just mesmerizing. I think that's probably the main attraction. Also, he can be very, very charming, very gentle, very generous, gives a lot of mink coats.
But you get the impression, though, that he really doesn't like women all that much. I mean, we said, were you an analyst to the extent that you could say this stemmed from his relationship with his mom? Or?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think anybody who reads the book and sees the relationship that he had with his mother and saw what he grew up with this tough, domineering mother and this very, very passive, sweet, ineffectual father, will really understand Frank Sinatra's complicated relationship with women.
But if he just has a woman who he can control, that wasn't enough to make him happy, because that's the kind of marriage he had to begin with.
Well, he has it now, and that's the way he's going to end life, with a woman who is on call at all times. He vowed that he would never, ever marry an actress again, and he will not tolerate any woman who has her own career at all.
Well, was that the problem with Ava Gardner? What was the story with her?
Well, the problem with Ava Gardner was, you know, this was the grand passion of Frank Sinatra's life. This is the woman that really leveled him, brought him to his knees. She was a female Frank Sinatra in a sense. They were both strong, possessive, jealous, passionate, and they were very, very much in love. The problem was that Ava Gardner was a huge star, and Frank Sinatra wasn't. He was financially dependent on her, and it was very, very hard for him. Also, he was so jealous of her, so possessive. I mean, he was always worrying that she was running off with Artie Shaw, or she was running off with a bullfighter, which she did on occasion, or airline pilots or whatever. So he could never keep tabs on her, and he couldn't hold her down long enough. As he said to Shecky Greene, he was never able to conquer her, ever.
But she ended up hating him.
Well, she didn't. Now they're very good friends. They're in constant touch with each other. She lives in England. He lives in the United States. She's in constant touch with Sinatra.
And Mia Farrow was such a bizarre
That
marriage.
was, yeah, you're right. That was bizarre. It was it just doesn't make much sense. They weren't married long. It wasn't a good marriage at all. And he rarely talks about her.
And he basically, you know, served divorce papers, sent them to her.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Well, he had his lawyer do it. You find that throughout Sinatra's life, when there's something that he doesn't want to cope with, we think of this man as so strong. He's really quite cowardly in a way. He'll send his lawyer. For instance, when Frank Sinatra was 60 years old, he was so frightened of his mother, much as he adored her, that he didn't have the nerve to tell her that he was going to marry Barbara Marx, because his mother couldn't stand Barbara Marx. So what he did was have his lawyer, Mickey Rudin, go to Dolly Sinatra to say that your son will be getting married. And he did the same thing when he wanted to divorce Mia Farrow. He couldn't tell her, so he sent Mickey Rudin to serve divorce papers.
Now, as much as he has these weird relationships and sometimes, you know, unhappy relationships with women, he really loved power and mobsters and politicians.
Absolutely.
You know, what's the story with the mobsters? What was the attraction there?
Well, you know, all of Sinatra's life, he said, I'm not friends with these men. I've just met them. I've never done business with them. What this book shows is that he did indeed do business with them. The wiretap cited in the book shows the many times that he did business with them. And I think his attraction to the mafia is that that's what it is, power. Exactly like you said, but it's the rawest form of power. And on the other hand, he's equally attracted to heads of state, like the President of the United States. So he has a foot in each camp.
Well, first of all, how has he been able to hide the mob connections for so long? The allegations have always been there, but somehow they've been cloudy enough that they haven't really been spoken of.
That's right. And now that they're documented in this book, it still won't make any difference because he has such political patronage from the President of the United States. That's how he's been able to keep them covered. There's no politician, at least in America, that's ever been able to say no to Frank Sinatra because he raises such vast amounts of money. The only White House that ever cut him out was the Kennedy White House, and that was after John F. Kennedy was elected president.
But you wonder how it's possible for him to maintain mob and White House connections.
Well, it's very easy because as long as he has somebody in the White House who's so close, no government agency is ever going to investigate Frank Sinatra. So as long as you don't have a government agency investigating your mob connections, then you're fine.
But he hated the Reagans at first in California.
He did indeed.
And now it's like bosom buddies.
He did hate the Reagans. In fact, he used to insist upon leaving the room if Ronald Reagan walked in. He called him a dumb John Birch Society nut, and he was equally disparaging of Mrs. Reagan. But in 1970, when the Reagans were running against a Kennedy man, Sinatra was so angry at Bobby Kennedy for cutting him out of the White House that he turned around and supported Ronald Reagan. And they've been close ever since. Even though, for this man, I mean, Sinatra started life as a liberal Democrat. This is a man who believed in Franklin Roosevelt, Adlai Stevenson, Harry Truman, John F. Kennedy. For him now to support Ronald Reagan doesn't make any sense if you're looking for political sense in Sinatra. But he doesn't have a political set of beliefs that's important to him. Instead, it's more important to be friends with the President of the United States.
Well, and Reagan gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in the same ceremony as Mother Teresa and Chuck Yeager. So that continues. He's able to court that.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the ultimate respectability that Frank Sinatra has achieved now through the Reagans.
Well, but you know, he's achieved that respectability. I guess he's also just endured, and you have to look at his, in spite of the press, the women, all the bad press, all the stories.
Actually, there hasn't been much bad press. Now, you're talking to someone who spent 4 years to do this book and interviewed 857 people. Very little bad press. For most of Sinatra's life, he's gotten a very, very good press because, in a sense, he's controlled it.
But what about him do you think has made him endure so much, though? Was it just this incredible talent?
Well, no, I think it's more than that. I think it's that wonderful talent that has meant so much to so many. Plus, the political overtones. Sinatra's associations with heads of state and the aura of the mafia. And it's glamorized him, I think, because he's much more than a singer, especially to Americans.
Yeah, but he is some singer, isn't he?
He is some singer. He is indeed, yes.
Well, I wonder, you know, what reading this book and knowing all this stuff does, you know, to fans of this man. I guess you'd get a lot of people saying to you, what do you get off doing this? It's like what people did to Elvis Presley. We don't want to know.
Exactly.
I want to listen to Come Fly With Me.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. And this book will make no difference to enemies. It'll make no difference to fans. But for those people who want to know, it'll be interesting, but it won't change anything.
What happens if you ever find yourself in the same, you know, reception gala city as Frank Sinatra? Does he...
Well, I might find myself in the same reception, but I'll never find myself close enough, you know, to say. Although, you know, I did try very hard to interview him. I wanted to interview him for this book. And he brought suit in 1983, actually, to stop the book. But I've never had an interview, and I don't know what would happen if I was in the same room.
You've never had any communication, though, since the publication?
No, no.
Good thing. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.